Welcome to Ag Expo. My name is Alan Neal, and we're at The Fold in Marengo, Illinois. And we're going to talk about fibers today. I am with the Warp and Weft Weavers Guild. There's so much everyone can learn from just looking at fibers and seeing how our clothes are made. This is a microscopic picture of different fibers. This is coarse wool, which is a very large micron sized wool. This is what feels rough on your neck. This is a fine wool, and it means that it's a it's much lower micron size. There are scales out here you can see easily on the wool. Alpaca has fewer scales, which is why it feels softer. Alpaca is also hollow. Cashmere has a few scales on it, but if you look at silk and linen, which comes from flax, cotton and polyester, they have almost no scales. So when they get spun, when they spin these fibers into yarn, the wool and alpaca and cashmere tend to stick to each other because of the scales, whereas the silk, the linen, and the cotton and most polyesters have to be more or less spun much tighter in order to get them to stick together. This is raw wool after it's been cut right off the sheep. In order to process it into yarn, all of the little bits of dead grass and vegetable matter has to be removed from this, and then it has to be washed because it's full of lanolin. It's very greasy. Revolutionary War days, they would leave the lanolin in the wool in order to make it more water repellent. It was also a lot heavier. Once it's washed, it has to be carded, and that's a process of just combing it out and stretching it out so that the different fibers will cling together better. This is the spinning process. Industrially, they'll take all of this and spin it into yarn, but this is a Lendrum spinning wheel, and essentially we're using the energy of the spinning wheel just to twist the fibers together into yarn. All those scales that we saw on wool make it cling to itself. So in order to plan your project, you need to know what size and what type of yarn you're going to use, and specifically what it's going to be used for. If you want something that's fairly heavy and will take a lot of abuse, you're going to want to use a heavier fabric like cotton. If you want something to wear as clothes, you'll want something that's soft and has a drape to it, meaning that it tends to fold over you instead of sort of sticking there like a board. This is a shocked 4-harness floor loom, simply working with different colors and different combinations of colors. It's amazing the amount of different fabric you can make. So the actual weaving part, I'm going to raise and push this treadle. This is a jack loom, which means that it raises these harnesses, makes that little triangle down here, and I go across, and I'm going to continue back and forth, and it's easy to get a rhythm going with this. Once you're done making all the fabric and tamping it together, why, you can just cut it off, hem the edges. So there's lots of math with this. All the math you did in 3rd or 4th grade, all those multiplication and division problems, this is how some of that gets put into use. So if I want to have a 20-inch wide towel, I'm going to multiply 20 inches by my set, which is going to be 15, and I'll come up with a number of 300, and then I'll add 10% for the draw-in factor that you get when threads are pulled together, and I'll come up with a number of 330. I want to balance my pattern, so considering the colors and these little floating edges out here, I came up with like 340 ends in my warp. And that's, once I add those 3 different colors onto this, I'll have about 340 different threads. In order to make 2 towels out of those threads that are 30 inches long, I'm going to multiply that by 2. I'll get 60. I'll add the 10% for the draw in this way. So I want 66 inches. There's a waist. There's a lot of waist with the weaving, which is, we'll figure 24 inches of waist. That means these have to be 90 inches long. 90 inches multiplied by 340. There's a big problem. 30,600 inches divided by 36 is 850 yards. That's what I need for the warp. For the weft, I've got 66 inches by 15, comes out to 990 inches, times the width back and forth, 22, comes up with 21,780 divided by 36 means 605 yards. So I'll need 850 yards to do my warp and 605 yards to do the weft.